Hello and welcome to another edition of Cracking the Cryptic. Now, we had a request on the channel to take a look at a puzzle called Sudoku Arrow or Sudocaro, or has a variety of names, but essentially you can see an example of it hopefully on the screen there. This is a puzzle where it's a normal Sudoku in terms of what you have to do, except that you get some additional information. So circled squares are made up of the sum of the squares that the arrows going from those circle squares hit. So for example, this square here, let's say that the answer to this square was a 9, then these two squares would have to sum to 9. So that's the constraint, and the question is how you go about solving these, and are they easier or harder than normal Sudokus? And the answer is nuanced. They're certainly very useful extra information, and they use sort of Kukuru and killer Sudoku techniques in the sense that there will be some arrow shapes that are highly restricted. But let's have a look at this puzzle and see how we might go about solving it. This is a puzzle from gmpuzzles.com, which I'm a big fan of because the puzzles there are hand created, if you like, by expert puzzle compilers. This is a Serkan Urakli puzzle again, and he called it Bob Marley, and I think that's on account of, you can sort of see how the shape of the arrows and the circles there, it is sort of a face, and I guess it might bear in wild imagination a slight resemblance to Bob Marley, but absolutely brilliant creativity, and his puzzles are normally extremely interesting and contain some good logic. So let's think about how we might do this. And just looking at it for a minute now, I think that the most obvious place to start is to look at the two columns that contain a lot of digits already, and to use the fact that in a puzzle like this, circle squares, obviously they can't contain the numbers 1 and 2 because they have to be the sum of at least two other numbers. So especially in the configurations that we have here, it's impossible that these circles can contain the numbers 1 and 2. So if we look at this column 2, for example, we have to place 1, 2, 4, 8 and 9, and it's also, I think, impossible that these two external squares here contain the number 4, because if they contain the number 4, you can see that the arrows going off these circles are at least 3 cells long. So the only way that, for example, this could contain a 4 would be if there were 2 1s in the arrow along the line of the arrow, and that's impossible in this configuration. If this is a 1, then this is also going to be a 1, so that's not possible. So we can say with certainty that these two external numbers there have to be 8 and 9 in some order. I hope that's clear on the screen. I'm obviously having to write that a little bit small, so I hope it's not too small. And we've got exactly the same configuration over here in column 8, where we've got 1, 2, 4, 8 and 9 to place again, and we've got these two circles on the edges that also have to be 8 and 9. So let's put the 8 and 9 in and see if that tells us anything about the puzzle. And the most obvious thing it tells us, I think, is that we now have in rows 1 and rows 9 this 8, 9 double, and I'm wondering whether we're going to be able to use that, especially down here, in fact, on this box, in order to place some numbers in here, because we've got 1 and 2 that have already been used up. So if this was a 7, for example, this would have to be a 3 and a 4 in some order, and you can see if this is a 6, it's impossible to fill this arrow now, because we've already got a 1 and a 2 in the row already. So in fact, we're able to use that fact. We can place a 7 here, and we know that these two squares have to be 3 and 4 in some order, because we can't use a 1 and a 2 in this sum. Now what else can we do here quickly? Let's have a look. Oh, well, we can use these two 5s here. This has to be a 5 just by simple Sudoku rules, and now think I'm right in saying that this has to be a 6. So let's write that in. That means there's a 6 in one of these two positions, just by simple Sudoku rules. And now the next place I would be looking would be in this box here. This is the most constrained box in the puzzle. Now, can we do anything with this box? You can see that we have to place 8 and a 9 and a 1 and a 2. Now, what we said earlier is that in a box like any of the circles can't contain a 1 or a 2, so we know this is a in fact 6 is the other possibility. I shouldn't remove or rule that out. So just to write at the bottom of the grid here, we've got 1, 2, 6, 8 and 9 to place in this box. You can immediately see this can't be a 6, because if it's a 6 I can't make a sum of 6 from the numbers that are left. So this is an 8 or a 9, and let's just put that in. This is 8 or 9. Now if it's an 8, there's only one way of doing it, and that would be if these two cells here are 2 and 6. So let's write that in as a possibility. And if this is a 9, then this would have to be 1 and an 8 would be the only way that could work. But I think one of these is going to be ruled out very quickly. And why do I say that? Well, it's because of the interaction of these cells here with these two cells above it. So you can immediately see, I hope, that if the 9 is not in this circle, what happens? The 9 is going to have to then be in one of these two positions, which means that it will be part of another summation. So if this is a 9, we have 9 plus a number that has to equal this box, or this circle here. That's impossible. So in fact there's only one place that the 9 can go in this 3 by 3, and that's here. And if this is a 9, that means that we know that the sum of these two digits has to be a 1 and an 8. And the 2 and the 6 appear in these two cells. Now I'm wondering whether we can use this fact to limit what can be contained in this central cell here. And this is one of the reasons I love puzzles by Serkan, because the logic is so clever here. We know one of these sums is going to contain a 6. So this number here cannot be less than a 6. It's going to have to be a 7, 8 or a 9. Now you can immediately see if this is an 8, then in order for these two cells get extremely constrained, they have to be 2 and 6 then in order to make the sums work. But that's ruled out because we already have a 6 over here. Similarly, if this is a 9, then these two numbers are going to have to be 3 and 7, which is ruled out by this 7. So in fact, there's only one option for this central square now, and that's a 7, which means that these two numbers here have to be 1 and 5 in some order that we haven't quite worked out yet. But we're starting to make progress now on this central section of the grid. And now we can make a bit more progress now, because you'll note that we need to place 1, 2 and 4 in column 8 here. But in this cell, this can't be a 1 because of this one, it can't be a 2. So in fact this has to be a 4, which means this is a 1 or a 2 and this is a 1 or a 2. Now we can use these 7, 7, 7. If we go over to this side of the grid, we can't place a 7 here, because if there's a 7 here it forms part of the arithmetic for this arrow. And you can see this whole, the maximum this could add to would be a 9, but we'd have 3 other cells as well as the 7 to add in, so clearly that can't work. The 7's going to have to be here. Let's put that in. And that means that the 7 over here, for the same reason, has to be in one of these 2 cells. Aha, now let's look at this square here. So we've now got a 4 as part of the arithmetic for this cell. But look, we've already got a 1 in this 3 by 3 box, and a 1 checking this position from this 1, 5 double. So this summation here cannot include the number 1. Now if this is an 8, let's ask ourselves how we can now fill this arrow. This could be a 2 and this could be a 2, but that would give us 2 2's in column 9. That's impossible. So this can't be an 8. There's no way of filling these cells if this is an 8. This in fact has to be a 9, and this has to be an 8. Now if this is a 9, these 2 cells have to sum to 5 without using a 1. That's only possible if they're 2 and 3. So this is going to have to be a 2. And this will have to be a 3. And that's nice. That means that this has to be a 1 and this has to be a 2. Which means that by simple Sudoku rules, this is a 1 over here, and one of these 2 cells is a 1, and I can't see anything else that we can immediately deduce there. So down here we've got 2, 7 and 8 to place. You can see we can make a bit more progress now. We can put 8s into those positions. In fact the 2 now can only go here. So this is 7, 8 into these 2 positions. We can unwind the 8 and the 9 over on this side like that. And you can see now we need to place 1, 3 and 9 in row 7. That means that this has to be the 1, and this is a 3 and a 9, and this is a 3 and a 9. We've got 4 and 6 to place here. So again, if this was a 6, these 2 cells would have to be 1. This can be a 1, this can't be a 1 here because of this 1. So this 6 is going to have to be over this side, and this is going to have to be a 4, which means by arithmetic this is a 3. That resolves the positions of the 3 and the 9. That means that there's a 9 in one of these 2 positions over here. Okay. So what can we do now? We can use the fact this 2's here. We're going to have to place a 2 in one of these 2 positions. In fact, this is a 2 or a 4 and this is a 2 or a 4, which is interesting in and of itself because we've now filled enough of the this 9 arithmetic, because we have a 9, a 2, a 4 and a 1 for certain in this summation. Now that all adds up to 7. So this cell here has to be a 2 by arithmetic, which means this is a 4 and this is a 2. So again, very nice logic from this puzzle. Now we need to place a 2 in the top row of the grid in this 3 by 3 box. It obviously cannot go in the circled square because these 2 cells would then have to be a 1, which is impossible, so we can place the 2 there. And this is already starting to get very restricted because we already have an 8 and a 9 in this row. But let's see if we can make a bit more progress before we use that fact. Can I see anything obvious? Again, we can use these 2's. We have a 2 here and a 2 here, so we need a 2 in this top in row 4 in one of these 3 positions, it can't go in the circled square, so it has to go here, which means this has to be a 2, this has to be a 2, and this has to be a 6. Now remember, as soon as we've done that, this resolves the positions of the 1 and the 5 as well, because we need them to, these summations to add to the 7 there, which allows us to place 5's pencil mark down here. Okay, we're getting closer to a workable solution now, I think. This cell in particular seems to me to be very restricted. What could it be? Well, it can't be a 3 because this would be a 1 and a 2. It can't be a 4 because this would be a 1 and a 3. It can't be a 5, we already have a 5. It can't be a 6 because we've got 1 and a 2 already in the column, and there's no way of making 6 in 2 cells without using a 1 or a 2. And it can't be a 7 because we already have a 7 in the box. It can't be a 9, so in fact this has to be an 8. And therefore these 2 cells here are 3 and 5, because again we can't use 1, 7 or 2, 6. We have a 3 here. So this is a 3 and this is a 5. That means this is a 5. We can remove that 5 there. That means we need a 3 in one of these 2 positions. Now if this was the 3, this would be a 5, which is impossible. So in fact this is a 3 here and this is a 1, which resolves this 1 and this 8 down here. One of these 2 cells now has to be an 8. One of these 2 cells has to be a 6, just by simple Sudoku rules. I'm not doing anything, I'm just using this 6 here to confirm that. And now this box is very restricted as well. Let's imagine, what could this be? It can't be a 3, we already have a 2 here. It can't be a 4 because we have a 3 here. It can't be a 5. Could be a 6, I think. I can't see a reason it couldn't be a 6 because 1, 5 is possible here. Can't be a 7, 8. Can it be a 9? That's rather annoying if it can be. 9. If this was a 9, then this could be 1 and 8, I think. So this is either 1 and 8 or it's 1 and 5. But it can't be 1 and 5 because we have 2 5s here. So in fact this is a 9 and this is 1 and 8 in some order. So this box is now very restricted as well. So we've got, what have we got? 5, 6 and 7 to place. So this has to be a 5. This has to be a 6, this has to be a 7. Therefore this has to be a 7 just by simple Sudoku rules. There's a 7 in one of these 2 positions and a 4 in the other position. It means we're probably able to finish this 8 now, I would think. What have we got left to place in this box? We have a 1 and a 9. Well, yes, okay. This has to be a 9, this has to be a 1. This 8 now needs a 4 to make the arithmetic work, so that's going to have to go there. That means this is a 6, this is a 4, and this is a 7. This is a 7, and this is an 8. It has to be a 5. Looking for 8 and 9 into these 2 positions. Both still possible at the moment. We can now resolve all of the stuff over here. This is all forced just by simple Sudoku rules. See, we have 3 and 4 to place here, so that has to be this way round now. like so. And over on this side of the grid we still have to place a 4 in this column, so that resolves this. And there we have it. So an absolutely beautiful logic problem, as usual, from this setter. And I hope this was a useful run through of the techniques you need for solving these pseudo-Caro problems. They're really nice, especially when done this well. So thank you for watching. If you like the channel, please do subscribe, and we'll see you again next time on Cracking the Cryptic.